Can you give a little bit of insight on maybe some of the players, more notable players you work with, just to kind of give a little more background of who
Yeah,
you
for
are?
sure. Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, I mean, I feel like it's both sides. Like I feel like I'm always picking stuff from a lot of trainers that I follow, and I like to, take things from. And nothing's going to be just me.
Yeah.
I feel like when you get to that point, you start to implement as much as you can from those around you
Mhm.
to try and tailor things to your way, right?
Right.
But yeah, I work with both Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So, I travel with them quite a bit. Right now, I'm in Minnesota with Nickeil, and obviously with the whole travel aspect, I mean, they take up a lot of my time.
Yeah.
But it's been fun to really just kind of dive into the basketball side of
Yeah.
things and really just focus on trying to get them the best training that they can both get.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I think, we see those guys and they're performing at such a high level from an athleticism standpoint and a basketball standpoint. But maybe I'm sure there's a lot of things behind the scenes when it comes to working with those guys. What are some things that you don't necessarily think, maybe seem sexy or seem like, hey, this is maybe not seem the norm, or this doesn't match what social media puts out there all the time, that they do have to focus on constantly?
The basics. Right? Like it literally you hear it all the time from so many guys, but it literally just comes down to the basics. And Instagram is it's a great place to like show cool things and different things, but it honestly just comes down to the basics and just staying consistent with them, and that's where we've seen the majority of results. Like sure, every summer I like to implement new things and add new things where, it's something to work on, something to try and further develop,
Yeah.
but it still boils down to like, okay, are the basics there? Like we're just building up on from that, right? Like where I feel like, you'll start going through Instagram and you'll see this cool exercise, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, where, younger trainers will be like, where do I even implement this? How do I even go about this? And you just kind of get lost in
Yeah.
like the vast library of exercises that you kind of come across on through
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah. And when you say basics, what specifically do you think of when you say basics? What stands out in your mind when you say the basics?
For me, it just comes down to for them at that level that they're at is my job, my primary role is essentially trying to keep them to be able to play, keep them injury free as much as possible. So to me, the basics comes down to how is their body functioning, right? Like from ground up, like how are I know we did a live before about the feet,
Yeah.
and that's just something that more and more every day I'm just like that. Like this is so important. It's just insane to me how little and people focus on it.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, like we'll still focus on doing little things from ground up. Every time we're doing exercises, okay, now like it's always barefoot. So, focusing on those things. Your regular squat, lots of lunges. I know me and you talked about that before with basketball players. Like most athletes in general, like lunges, like that's your primary exercise,
Should be.
in my opinion, and I feel like you
Yeah,
feel
I
the
agree with
same
you.
way.
Yes.
So it's those things, and then once things are starting to function and you're going through an off season, sure you can throw in your exercise here and there that might be a little bit different. It might challenge them in different ways,
Yeah.
but if that's all you're focused on, then what I mean, it's hard to actually get the changes that you're looking for and the growth that you're looking for.
For sure. For sure. And it's just like, you talk about the basics and how extremely important that is. And honestly, one of the biggest things for these guys at this level is to really make sure that they can just function the correct
Right,
way.
right.
But and when we look at players across the league, we have guys who function a variety of different ways. Now, for the most part, a lot of them are staying healthy, are doing a decent job staying healthy. There are those guys who get injured year in, year out, but I guess the point I'm trying to get at is seeing such an array of athletes, seeing such an array of different types of athleticism. When we think of like, Anthony Edwards and Ja Morant with being, super fast and explosive and that, really fun to watch type of basketball, compared to like the Luka and Paolo, who are a little bit more slow and controlled and methodic about things. you know, do you feel like the direction of NBA athleticism is growing, or do you feel like it's going a certain way versus another? How do you see the game of athleticism within the game of basketball going?
I would definitely think it's growing. I feel like it's part of guys having to adapt to, certain times of like, okay, well, we have so many freak athletes. Then it's like, all right, well, guys are now trying to figure out how to play against them. Then, you know what I mean? It just to me it's just a constant cycle of trying to adapt to the next, you know, wave of good guys,
Yeah,
whatever way they are athletic in. And you're still always gonna have your freak athletes, but it's no longer like you're just a freak athlete and you're going to be
yeah,
successful. Like you got to now develop a game on top of that because there are guys that might not be as athletic, but they're figuring it out. They're trying to find ways to beat you, and
yeah,
whether or not it's jump over you or in Luka's case is beat you with the first step. And you know what I mean? Like there's
yeah,
still levels to it. Sometimes it might not look to the naked eye like, oh my God, this is crazy athleticism because you're comparing it to freak athletes on the same court, right? So
right.
to me, it's just it's a constant growth, and guys are just trying to figure out ways, and they're adapting to where the game is at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you 100% because, like you said, we've had this years of and decades of freak athletes who have kind of dominated the NBA. But in the last, I mean, when we look at the last,
Right,
honestly, last 10 years, it's really shifted a ton. When we look at guys who, as far as one of the top players in the league for the last 10 years with Curry, when we look at that
right,
guy, he's not quote unquote the stereotypical athletic guy. But when we
exactly.
look at his conditioning, his footwork, all the little small basic
Right,
details, and I was going over this with Sean Green from Priority One Athletics, is his footwork is just Curry's footwork is just phenomenal, and he's such a master of it. One of the things I really love about Shai, watching Shai, is just I feel like he's always a master of body control, and I love seeing that because it's you can tell like every movement is so methodical, and he's a
right,
tactician at heart, and
right.
it's really cool because now we can compare. Now we have such a variety of players, a variety of athletic types who can still be successful in the NBA.
Exactly. And that's that I agree with that 100%. Like it doesn't just come down to one trait of like, okay, this guy can jump 50 inches or this guy just has the quickest lateral change of direction. Like it's little things like the footwork, the body control, the conditioning, like you said, to just nail on Curry. I mean, his conditioning has got to be up there, like second to none,
Yeah.
right? So what he's able to do with quote unquote not being the most athletic is impressive, but in and of itself is an athletic feat.
Yes. Yes, no, yeah, and even though it's not from a stereotypical sense, he's
Right,
not athletic. He's still outrageously athletic, and more athletic than 99% of the people on this
for sure.
planet because of other details that go
Definitely.
into it. Maybe vertical doesn't stand out as much, but his quickness, his change of direction, and this is I think where we've always talked about why the lunge pattern is such an important part of any sort of basketball player's lifting regimen is because the game is all about change of direction.
Right.
That will give you success. And when we look at players who have success over and over and over, yeah, the high flyers are into that category, but their ability to change direction is really what sets them apart. And then
Exactly.
we can also see this with guys like, who aren't traditionally, athletic or, even fast, like Luka, Harden, Curry's not the fastest in the world, but it's him. And seeing how these guys are so impressive because of their ability to change a direction. Yeah, I agree, man. It's such a cool thing. So when we think about these players, or when we see these types of different types of athleticism, when we see that it's more than just being a high flyer, it's more than just being able to jump, X amount of inches. Um, how do we develop that? How do we go about when it comes to really, what is the balance between developing that athleticism and truly developing that athleticism between and putting time towards that and putting time towards court work, because there's always that balance of like, oh, I'm not a good enough shooter, or I'm not good enough in that category. A certain skill within basketball, but then not, and then some. But sometimes I feel like guys don't always, and I think it goes all the way up to the NBA, but especially younger guys, they don't pay attention of, hey, I haven't developed this trait of
Right.
athleticism. So what do you feel like that balance is?
So I think definitely it's very dependent on age and honestly their level of basketball. Like
Yeah,
if we're talking about at the pro level, is adding 2 inches, 3 inches to the vert gonna help their game?
yeah,
Like, is that what they depend on for somebody like, that guys that I train? Like, it might
right,
not be as beneficial,
right,
right? Like, that's not what their game is predicated on. So, I think it's very dependent on the type of like the game that the actual athlete has. And then when if you're at a younger age, when you're, still developing, still maturing, take advantage of that to try and, further speed up that process of your maturing and your natural growth into your body and athleticism to try and, learn about it. So that way, when you get to that point, when we spoke about earlier, you're not having to relearn things and developing poor habits.
yeah,
But I think it honestly because it comes down to there needs to be, again, depending on the game. Some guys that are freak athletes, like, do they need to add another 2, 3 inches to the vert, or should they go spend some more time, in the gym working on their game?
yeah,
Maybe developing a jump shot. So now that they can be more useful on the court. So it's no longer just, all right, let me just be a high flyer athlete,
sure,
right? So I think it just comes down to the age and then their game style, to be honest with you. Like, I see a lot of the stuff that you do with the
yeah,
younger guys,
yeah,
and to me, it's like perfect. Like they're at that age where you want to try and develop all those athletic
yeah,
traits, right? In my case, I don't have to spend as
right,
much time with it because first and foremost, the goal is okay. Well, you've already, you've been playing for 5, 6, 7 years now. You know what your game
yeah,
is. You know what it's predicated on. So, are these little things going to actually benefit you, or do you just want to feel like, oh, I got 2 inches higher in my vert, or I got
right,
a little quicker in my 40, but how does that really translate to your game?
right,
So I
right.
feel like,
Now,
yeah, that's where a lot of guys get lost is like, okay, well, how is this going to help me? You
yeah,
know?
definitely. Now, if that's part of your game where you're known to be more of an athletic guy and that's your role on the team, all right, let's, from a defensive standpoint, you definitely have to have really great change of
For
direction.
sure.
Or if you're a rim protector, now vertical becomes important
Exactly.
when you're a rim protector, or you're just, hey, if I'm a pick and roll guy and every time I get into the paint, I'm going to, be physical and I'm going to be dominating in that area. Now vertical is important.
Exactly.
Now some of those more physical, kind of the glamorous side of athleticism, athletic development becomes important. But like you said, for a guy like, probably like Shai's game, I love watching Shai's game because, like I've said before, he's such a tactician about his moves, but his ability to change the direction is just crazy. And I know, and I've seen the stuff that you do, and I see that you work on that change of direction aspect, and or that first step aspect as well, and it's really cool to see that now. So from if I'm getting this right from you, you're saying guys should maybe put a little bit more of that effort into their athleticism when they're younger and they don't necessarily know their game, versus on the other side when they're older, they kind of know their game and they can kind of maybe be more like a little pickier
Yeah.
with
So
that.
I think it's, yeah, exactly. Like if when you get to a certain level and, let's say you weren't, lucky enough to go through proper training during those ages, like guys that you're working with right now in high school
Yeah.
level, if you are at a level and you've already established who you are as a player, then I think just focus essentially on what's going to make you excel at that even better, as opposed to like, okay, let's say a guy is a 3-and-D guy.
Mhm.
Does he need to go work on, and he's been playing for 10 years, does he need to go work on getting a 40-inch vert? Is that going to help him? No.
No.
Why worry about that right now when you have a career, you've established yourself the way you've been playing for the past whatever it is. But when you're at that younger age, develop overall athleticism so that okay, well, let me maximize this so I can see now what I can develop my game into having all this athletic ability actually being maximized.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with you 100%, man. And having worked with a few pros in the past, that's what it becomes. Is hey, they're so locked in on maybe a very specific trait
Right.
of their game when it comes to athleticism. I've had guards who are like, I only care really about first step.
Yep.
I only care about my lateral quickness. And then I've had big men who, same thing, but they also or they'll say, "Hey, I only care about my pick, how athletic I am in my pick and roll."
Right.
And so we just break down the pick and roll and every aspect of it, from setting that screen to rolling well and efficiently, to the footwork, to what's your footwork to that basket. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun just kind of be able to break the game down to like that level in terms of athleticism. It really, I always feel like it makes you kind of show off your bag a little bit as
Yeah,
a
for
trainer,
sure.
because now you're like, all right, now we're getting into the nitty gritty, and what is that footwork, or what is that
Right.
balance in your hips and your total
Yeah.
bodies like? So
And that way you're trying to adapt to each individual and then how
yeah,
they actually,
that's fine.
what they're going to benefit from and the
Definitely.
details that they kind of need.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, so you mentioned that that word detail, and I feel like this is a word that's been thrown around for the last 4, 5, 6 years,
Yeah.
and now it's overused to the point where I think that the understanding of the word gets a little misconstrued and misunderstood. So in your mind, when you hear the term, or you hear the phrase "details of the game," from your standpoint, what do you think of?
So I think of like essentially what we were speaking about right now. So if I'm trying to, get a guy to learn a new move, to me the details behind that is what are you like I want the desired outcome. I want to know that he's feeling everything I need him to feel. Like, what are you feeling when you take this step? Where do you feel like your weight is? Your center of pressure. Like, what are you using to maximize this?
Yes.
What does your brain feel? So trying to develop feel patterns of it, like to
Yeah.
me, those are details. So exercise standpoint, like I'll sometimes see guys doing, something, let's say like an overhead split stance tricep extension,
Yeah.
and back foot externally rotated, heel down. So
Mm,
I'm thinking like if it's an athlete, how does that benefit you? Because you're missing a major
yeah.
detail of, when I'm in a split stance, my weight is forward.
Yeah.
So I'm teaching my body, I'm ready to go forward.
Yeah.
So how does me now having my back foot externally rotated and heel all the way down, now pushing, just doing the exercise? Because all you're thinking about is the tricep extension.
Yeah.
So you're missing half the battle right there,
Right.
right? Like the details are being completely ignored. Okay, how is the body positioned? So to me, it comes down to those things. When I'm trying to get or teach guys, new things. What are you feeling? And then trying to go ground up details. Okay, well, this is where I think you can improve. This is where I want this position to be, and go on and so forth. Right. So
Yeah.
to me, those are details. I mean, I'm sure there's different ways that people will, use that word and throw it
Yeah.
around, like you said. So sometimes you'll just see it, and it's like, well, what do you mean by details?
Yeah.
Just because you're doing a lunge with a med ball, and like you're rotating, that's not details. Like, how are you doing that lunge? What does that athlete feel during that lunge?
Yeah.
Is he actually feeling what you want him to feel? Right?
Yeah.
Like, is
And
he?
how does it carry over? How does it
Is
carry
and
over?
how does it carry over? So to me, it's all those little things that might not always be visible to the naked eye, but
Yes.
as you kind of understand the game a bit more and as you work with guys more, you start to
Yeah.
really, dive into it. And I know
Yeah.
you always talk about this too, is putting yourself through what you're gonna put guys through,
Amen.
so you know what it feels like,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm doing this exercise, I know exactly what I want you to get out of it because I put myself through it.
Right.
So I know how to essentially try and cue you to get that desired outcome.
Right. Yep. No. Yeah. You're 100% right, man. And I think that's an underappreciated thing when it comes to trainers and training. Is yeah. Don't Obviously looking the part is one thing,
For
but it's
sure.
more so understanding what they're going through physically, and
Exactly.
understanding, hey, like you mentioned, if that back foot in a lunge stance is externally rotated and that heel is down, why?
Yep.
Understand, and you may not know exactly what muscles tight, what muscles are a little bit more lax, but if you can understand the feel and rotation in your hip or in your knee, you can understand that a little bit more. So yeah, no, definitely agree with you on those details. So then, taking those details or understanding those details, let's say you don't have someone who is either like me or like you, who really dives in on the nitty gritty of these details. If you're talking to a hooper, whether they're age, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years old, what are you telling them that they should be focusing on more? What details should they be focusing on more when it comes to just athleticism?
I would say it needs to come down to a point where there's intent behind what you do. So when I'm going through, specific exercise, like you said, the lunge, I find it so many times that, like, you'll teach the athlete something, and then sure, they might get in that scenario, but then they just forget about it. So when you're trying to see how it translates, or if they're implementing it with various other things, they just don't think about it. So to me, the biggest thing is I want guys, when I'm training, when I'm working with them, is to understand what the hell is actually going on, and to break it down to a point where, let's say it comes down to trying to, like, load through the hip, showing various examples of how to get into that position, so that they get the one feel that they need. So it's no longer about, okay, let that knee and hip rotate. Like, it just comes down to, when I say, yo, load your hip, you know what I'm talking about, because we've been through that. You know what the feel
Yeah.
is. So to me, it's like the little things like that, so that when you go through exercises, and guys leave you and go to their team, and do what they do, they
Yeah.
can still focus on those little things, and they just know, okay, well, this is what this feels like. So when I now, if my next trainer, or whatever the case is, wants to implement something new, I know how to really just get the most out of, like, okay, my positioning, and how to make my body function
Yeah.
in that specific exercise without compromising, everything I've essentially tried to teach myself.
Yeah. No, yeah, I like that, man. I love that because, and really we're getting down to education of these athletes to know how their bodies should be functioning.
Yeah,
Now, they don't need to know, like, are they wanting to know? Do they need to know? Is it important for them to know every little detail in terms of, everything that comes down to, hey, why do I have, pain at the front of my knee, or
right,
why is my foot externally rotating all the time? Do they need to know every little detail that goes into it? Maybe not, but at the very least, they need to understand how to correct it. And if they see
exactly,
their body, kind of go the opposite direction, the direction that, we talked about, how it shouldn't go, how do they bring it back to kind of that
right,
balanced situation? So no, that's fantastic, man. I love that because and that's what I tell every single guy that I work with. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to train you forever, and that's
exactly,
okay. Whether we have a great high school, whether great college career, you play pro, and you decide to use me for 20 years of your pro career. There's probably a solid half of your life that I won't be training you, but you can still learn to take care of your body
exactly,
after the game at the very least.
exactly.
So no, I think that's fantastic, man. I'm just going through some of these comments right now, and one of the questions we got here was, when it comes to, when you see guys in terms of hard work versus natural talent, is there something that really stands out to you in your mind when you see a guy who maybe has natural talent but not hard work, or vice versa, where they don't have that natural talent or hard work? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like over time it's going to catch up.
Yeah.
So if the work isn't being put in, it's going to catch up to you, because that's going to eventually wear off, and that margin that, is going to just get slimmer and slimmer, to a point where your natural talent is no longer what it was at the age 20, or at the age, 18, compared to other 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
When you get to 30, and you're now with 30-year-olds that have been putting in some serious work for the last 15 years, like, that natural talent is no longer going to be anything, right? So to me, it comes down to, again, a lot of these guys at the pro level, there's still natural talent there. There's still, natural abilities, and some good genetics, but that only lasts for so long. And that's
It's
why your typical NBA career is going to be like 3
Yep.
years, right?
Yep.
It just boils down to that work that actually gets put in.
I yep, I agree with you, man. And I've seen, and unfortunately, I've seen that with guys. I've seen both sides. You know, guys who do put in that hard work and guys who don't put in that hard work. And you know, it's definitely, you know, you hate to see it sometimes, just because it's like, oh man, you got a good future ahead of you, and
Right.
um,
And like, it's not always gonna work out if you do
yeah,
put in the hard work,
yeah,
but that's okay because it's gonna lead to something else.
and and I think that's a very underrated, you know,
Exactly.
aspect is look, just because you put in the hard work and you didn't get the result that you wanted, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was for nothing.
Exactly.
Because you build that character, and I
Right.
know that's talked from a cliche
Yeah, it's
standpoint,
cliche, but
but there's truth behind it, and there's opportunities outside of just playing the game.
100%.
And so if you worked your butt off and were a person of character, things will always, in my opinion, always come back
100%.
around and help you out.
And it's hard to see that maybe at a younger age. Like I know for myself, going through high school, basketball was
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
So when that didn't work out, it's just like, damn, like all that for nothing is the initial thought. But now looking back at it, I'm like, well, honestly, that just made me who I am. Like,
yeah,
all those mornings and doing those things. Like
yes,
now when I'm around guys that do it, I'm like, okay, I know what this is like. I'm seeing it. Is like
yeah,
I know this is what it takes to even just continue it. So
yeah,
I'll always be on top of them, like, yo, making sure that that stays, that's still going.
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Well, Nem, I appreciate you hopping on
Of
this,
course,
man. This
bro.
has been fantastic. I know this has just been a wealth of knowledge for, you know, people to listen to this, and I will be posting this and collaborating with you.
Cool.
So that being said, appreciate you.
Yeah,
I would love to do
for
this
sure, bro.
sometime again in the future.
100%.
And other than that, man, you know, good luck with your travels, safe
Appreciate it, bro.
travels. All right,
Have a
take
good
care.
one, man. Take care.